Well, welcome back, everyone. I'm chatting with Roger Obando, and we've tackled a number of different topics, and most recently talked a little bit about cannabis tech, a new industry, and we started getting into, experience versus youth, and so I want to take the conversation a little bit to teams and teams versus individuals and our leadership philosophies, and talk a little bit about how you grew your team, and a little bit about how we did ours you have to recruit, you have to hire, you have to put the right people in place. And personally, through my experiences, at various companies, I've come to believe very much in the power of the team versus the individual, right? I've read a lot of sports leadership books. There's a lot of parallels, and in fact, we both went to Duke. Coach K has this analogy of the fist, and he talks about, imagine an open hand and trying to punch a wall, right? With everyone, the fingers all representing people, and going into the wall individually, compared to the fist where they're all together, right? And that the power of the team is much stronger than that of the individual. And so through my experience and through a lot of this reading, like I've really come to believe in the fact this adage, and that I tell a lot of my team, that we're not going to hire the brilliant, pardon my language, but it doesn't matter how brilliant they are. The more important part is that you find pieces that work well together to make a bigger whole. And I know from our conversations, you're a big believer in that as well. But I'd love to hear about how you went about building the team that you did at Baker.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we definitely bonded on that point. I had, my team would actually joke with me, my HR team, before I actually had a head of HR, and said I couldn't actually say this in the office anymore. But I would tell people that the no was the only rule that I had. I'd be willing to look at anyone else. I don't care what their background is. I don't care if they have a degree. I don't care. Like, I'll talk to anyone. Just don't bring me that. I know that we didn't make that up. I mean, that was in a book that I read years ago. I can't remember if it was Reed Hastings or if it was, but it was definitely something where someone made a point of pointing that out. And I had I'll say the pleasure of working with some of these brilliant past, because it really taught me about what I don't want to have in the future. Yes, can they solve very difficult problems? Absolutely. Are they toxic to the culture? 100%. And no one wants to work with the individual. It's almost like, the misery spreads, and it's so toxic to the group. But there is that really, really early stage piece that is difficult, because, I like to joke about how the CTO title is so funny when you're talking about a brand new startup, because all it is, you're just a glorified developer. I mean, that's all you do. You just build stuff. That's your whole job.
And sometimes you're the developer. Sometimes you're the VP of engineering. Sometimes you're running products. Sometimes you're running operations. Sometimes, you name
sometimes you're the janitor. I mean, you're cleaning the tables. That's
or the IT person, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you're definitely the IT person. You're the guy setting up all the wireless. You're the guy setting up everything. But that's great. Like, you have to be able to own that, right? And you own your code base, and you're building something, and you're really proud of the innovation that you're making happen. And then, kind of at the flip of a coin, like, at some point you're like, I got to grow the team. I can't do this anymore. And you bring the team member in, and it's a lot to ask for you to just be like, here's half the code base. That's yours now. Do with it what you will, right? You can't really necessarily do that. Like, in these early stages, you still have to own a lot of it, and slowly ramp people up, especially, well, actually, with large companies, this is the case as well. Like, having ownership over something is one of the best ways to make someone feel really invested in what they're doing. And it's got to be legitimate.
Yeah, I 100% agree. In fact, I'd say that for what I look for in someone is probably the biggest thing is both their desire and ability to take ownership over something. Because I kind of look at it as, if I feel the need to micromanage someone, then it means they're not taking ownership, and it's the wrong fit. Right. I want to be able to hand things off and put my trust in someone, because I'm hiring them because they're smart, because they have capabilities, because they can take this and go be an expert in that area and do better things than I can do.
Yep, absolutely. And I realize, I think over the years, my process for hiring people has definitely gotten better. In the early days of doing startups, you're just moving so fast. I feel like, I thought, at least for a long time, I need warm bodies. I need warm bodies who can code. I need people who can knock stuff out. And only further down the line, I was like, well, that's one thing, but then down the road, if it's a cultural mismatch, then you end up having the situation where you're having turnover and then there's knowledge transfer and all that other stuff. So also spend a little more time up front, ensure that the person is a good culture add. I don't like to use the word culture fit. It doesn't,
Yep.
creates very heterogeneous cultures. Make sure this person brings something to the table, but that their, the DNA matches what the team wants to be, and then provide them with the tools they need to be successful. I tell folks that I think in a company, especially like, let's call it growth phase, seed phase to growth phase, the number one job of the CTO should be to be a umbrella. It's like my job is to ensure that I'm dealing with all of the BS that you don't want to deal with anyway, so that I can clear up your calendar so that you can focus on what you're here to do, and you can own that and you can move that forward, and just make sure that I'm informed about everything that's happening and that we're making these decisions together and that we're staying on track. But I'll take care of all this other, BS. And I think that, really points to being a servant leader. Like I really do believe in that, right? I think I'd like to joke with people that at a certain point, I'll never forget this at Baker. I think it was like our 25th hire on the engineering team. Really smart guy. He was brought in, and like within a week, he was like looking at some code, and he just exclaimed out loud, he's like, "Who wrote this code?" And I was like, I raised my hand. I was like, "What are you talking about?" He pointed out. I was like, "Oh yeah, I wrote the code. I wrote it when I was the only one sitting in this room, and I had to get it done just to get this out the door."
Yep.
He's like, "But now I can afford you, so your job is to fix it. Your job is to own this and to do it the right way. My job then was to make enough headway to be able to get enough money to be able to hire you so that you could fix it."
I love that. I joke with the team all the time that I would love to get to a point where there's not a single line of code left that I wrote.
Yeah.
Right. Because what that means is that people who are dedicated to it, who are focused on it, who are actually focused on the right thing at the right time, not just getting us to a point where we could go hire those folks, are actually like owning this code and taking it, right? And it's great to go through these various stages where, I hand off, various big parts to people, and no longer was, I was no longer the expert in this area or that area.
So liberating. I remember the first time I was able to go on vacation and not take my laptop with me.
Oh yeah.
It was probably 2.5 years in, but the first time I was like, I'm comfortable with only my phone. Like they can call me if something goes wrong, but they know that I'm not going to open my laptop and start trying to fix this from wherever I'm at.
That was a funny thing. I actually saw, so, I used to take a summer trip every summer. And I found that like that summer trip, me being gone for a week, always, the team always took a massive step during that time, because it forced them to take on things that I had been doing. And most likely some of those things that I didn't need to be doing, but I was doing out of habit, or people were coming to me out of habit. And it forced them to take those on. And I would always come back and see, it's like, oh, I don't need to do that. I can step away from this. I can step away from that. And it is refreshing, right? It's fantastic. And it reminds you that this is why I hired this team. I hired this team. And to your point about servant leadership, is my job in hiring this team is to give them what they need and get out of their way.
Absolutely.
On that note, I know you're enjoying a little bit of time off too. So I want to thank you, raise a glass to your success here. And thank you for taking some time to chat with me about your journey, about teams, about, being a CTO and throwing it back to college, and all the best.
Absolutely, man. It's been a pleasure. It's always great to talk to old friends about this sort of stuff. And it's always great to see old friends be successful and find their own, unicorns in this case, as it were. So congrats again on that. And I hope to see you get to the next level. And, what's next? 10 billion, 100 billion? Is that the move?